Bam.
And this is Miichael Swerdloff on the Break It Down show.
That's right. Michael on the show with me today. We're going to talk about his book. His book is new, and it's called Raised by Wolves, Possibly Monsters. And it's a longer title. We'll get into all that stuff. But I guess the first thing we were talking off mic, and I think this stuff is hilarious, but all of the things, the etiquettes that we've had to learn from having to do these live things. It's amazing. You're in Rhode Island. I'm in Orange County, and we're talking basically in real time with no latency. It's amazing that we can do this. But we've had to learn, just like people from our generation, we had to learn how to put down a phone when we're drunk and not drunk text. And all of the things that we've had to learn, the technology, this is just the latest one.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And we can have a conversation between a Dodger fan and a Yankee fan at the same time. And because we're not in the same room, we can't hurt each other.
Yeah. You know what? I am probably more a baseball fan, right? And I can appreciate how great the Yankees are. Here's how I rank. So I am a Dodger fan. I am an A's fan, but I can go to any game and enjoy myself because I'm less about the outcome. Yeah, more about celebrating, life and baseball and all that kind of stuff. But the funny thing, when I root for the team that has the longest World Series drought, and it's years over never. So the Brewers have never won one, but it's been longer for the Indians. So I would root for the Indians over the Brewers. Does that make sense?
It does.
And then I go to California, and then I go to special interests, so-and-so's never won, and so there's a little ranking in there with all that stuff. But look, the Dodgers, the Yankees, they're pretty rich when it comes to championships. I've got tolerance for KC. If they were to win, I would have enjoyed that. Although they won more recently than the Yankees, I guess. Agreed.
And the Dodgers and Yankees, they've made a lot of money. Forget about championships. There's a lot of money there.
Yeah. So I did a show, actually the show before this one, with an author named Steve Ditmore, and he did a book on Jim Gilliam. And I seems like I've broken into this area where there's a lot of authors who write books about the Dodgers that end up on my show, partly because it interests me, but also now that I've done several, I've sort of become a destination. And I'm trying to do that for other teams. But the God's honest truth is there's not as many books written about most of the other teams.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yep.
I believe that. It makes a difference. Yeah, it makes a difference in terms of availability too. So even there, we talk about the money, money begats money. And so, it's they have more stars, they have more things to write about, they're more part of the zeitgeist. And there's a book right now I'm reading about the emergence of the 60s era Dodgers and race and how all this stuff goes together. It's fascinating, right? But you can't write that book about the Brewers because they didn't even exist then.
Didn't exist. That's right. Good point.
Yeah, we all grow up from somewhere different, though. You do too. So maybe the Brewers end up somewhere. The Dodgers have evolved over the years, but we all grow up to become better versions of ourselves. I know. I'm 54. I'll be 55 beginning of the year. I know that oftentimes my first emotional response is the one that I have to hold on to because the next one coming in the queue is the better response and more accurately represents who I am. I'm not shielding or hiding. I'm just being more mature. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I run into that a lot. And I work with an organization called Dance New England. I'm a program manager, part-time gig I have. And because I do tend to say a lot when I open my mouth, they encourage me to take a breath before I say something and go to the second thing before I say it, because the first thing often is going to poke somebody uncomfortably.
Right.
For no reason.
Right. Yeah.
It's different than calling out people when you're poking them out of carelessness is different than calling somebody out.
Even then, I think you can cut that into a layer or two deeper, right? Because it's easy to pull out the hammer and smash, but that may not be the right tool when you do have to check somebody on anything, right? I mean, like when I look at parenting and my daughter's mom, she did the great job. She did all the hard work. I was mostly gone working in combat zones. But when she calls me, I know she's tried the hammer, she's tried the saw, You know, she tried the other. So it's on me to break out the handcrafting tools and be like, you know, and try to find a different pathway to these things. And again, this is part of this maturity that I'm talking about that guys like us, we've had to go through.
Yep, totally. I'm with you.
How do you recognize, how did you build and how did you recognize these tools, the need for them?
Oh, gosh. Boy, I'm just going to spit out a bunch here. Is that okay, Pete?
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Great. So I got clean and sober in 1989. And interesting for somebody who lives in the United States, it was actually September 11th. So September 11th has two really big impacts on me as
Right.
someone who grew up outside of New York City and got sober on September 11th. But I think I was 5 years sober. Let's see. No, I was 5 years sober, and I was backpacking across the United States. And I ended up in Bloomington, Indiana, and then ended up in an intentional community living with a bunch of hippie type humans. And since they all lived there for a while, they had asked me to do a sharing circle with them and tell my story. And I hadn't yet spent time in the Midwest, and I wasn't prepared for them not being prepared for my story, because there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of hate. And that's when I learned about you have to adapt to where you are. Because what I could say in Brooklyn, what I could say in Newark, what I could say anywhere in New Jersey or New York City and the metro area in Philly, most of the world you can't say the way that we would say it then. And so that was the first step for me of realizing, oh, they're not ready to hear this the way I'm going to say it. And it's going to defeat the purpose of me opening my mouth.
Yep. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. There are times where the reality that I was in is not transferable to the person I'm talking to. I can use all the words, but you know, look, I worked, and you have a lot of similarities. And I've noticed this about people who've worked in crime, I'll say syndicates, right? Just crime in general. You have different rules. And so when I'm talking about life and death stakes a lot of times. And you know, you make a decision because it's for your own survival or your team's survival. And it's completely normal in the context of somewhere in Iraq or Afghanistan, but it's wholly inappropriate in, you know, whatever, Chicago, Illinois, maybe not Chicago, maybe outside in Fox, somewhere on the Fox River, right?
Right.
And you're like, no, we totally knew this guy was going to die. And we took advantage of that because he was going to die anyhow. So we figured we'd use that to get a win. It's like when you say that to a dinner party, it's a different word, different time. You guys have to understand that they can't understand that.
No. I remember when my cousin John, who was in Nam, and he came back, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, but I think it was decades before he said anything about his experience. I mean, literally decades. And one day we were all sitting around watching a movie, laughing, and something happened on TV in the movie. And he says, he said something along the lines of, yeah, it really sucks when you have 7 dead people lying on top of you. And I was like, what? Like, he forgot that we're not ready for that. And I was okay with it, but I was just like, wait, you haven't even said you've been there in 30 years. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how did this just slide out? But what that told me, Pete, was that that's in his brain enough that it can slide out if he's not paying attention. And I don't mean that he shouldn't have said it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Just that he wasn't prepared. We weren't prepared for him not being prepared to say that out loud.
Yeah, I was talking. I was home. It was very exciting where I was at in Iraq, and I had said some things in front of my daughter that I thought were relatively innocuous, but she is a little kid. And because I haven't spent a lot of time with my parent hat on, you know, I'm just kind of talking without any kind of filter. And I gave my daughter bad dreams, and I felt like a horrible person because I don't want to lie to her, but I also want to protect her from some of these truths that I can share later.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I was just connecting just about an hour ago. There's a person that's in my community that's working, helping me with TikTok and Instagram for my book promotion. And something that we said, she mentioned, well, you have to remember, most of the people on TikTok, Michael, they're used to seeing videos of what's happening in Gaza. And because I don't use TikTok often enough to know that, because all I see is my friends and other authors and other counselors and other people fighting for healthy masculinity and gender and recovery, like the things that my life are about. I don't know any of this is happening. And I was just like, wait, what did you just say? And I can't imagine, Pete, being 15-year-old and you're scrolling through all of your friends eating breakfast or talking about getting drunk, and then you run into 3 videos of children with their legs off. I can't conceive of running into that by accident. There's no part of me that understands what that experience would be. Like I can say I understand being surprised by hard things, but golly, I don't have anything in my history that matches up with that.
Right. And we had, when we were growing up, some shielding from that, right? It wasn't as accessible, the immediate violence. Like when you're 15, you're like, I am just hoping to touch some boobs sometime in the next 2 months, maybe
Or
see
years.
a picture of some boobs, Yeah. Right. Exactly. I'm over here being aggressive. But and now it's a simple search for a single digit kid, like 8 years old, 9 years old, just on there, and it's like, I like boobs, bam, and there it is, right? And so kids have to process a lot heavier things without any kind of reliable filter.
And I think it must be incredibly hard. And I've heard kids say this with me, clients and friends. They don't know when they go searching for things that next year and 3 years from now, what they searched for is going to affect them. Like what you're talking about, looking for naked women and looking for porn and looking for violence and all of that stuff. They don't realize how in 1 month, 1 year, 4 years, 8 years from now, this is going to impact me that whole time. This thing that seemed really cool to learn about right now. Like, I want to learn about this thing. I want to hear about it. I want to see it. And it's like, oh shit. I can't unsee it, to use that expression. You can't unsee
it. You can't unexperience these things too, right? No. Again, like you've got damage, I've got damage, and now here we are on the other side of some level of recovery, but it's still there, and when I go to sleep, my brain is still like, don't you think I forgot about this stuff? Here it comes. And, and so you get woken, so these things do stick with you, maybe for the rest of your life. Maybe you're better at filtering and screening and putting it in a box, but it's still there. And that's one of the things I'm interested, like when you get into the counseling side of this, one of the things I learned from my therapist is, this may not get better. You may just stay right here for the rest of your life. And you may be thrilled to have a little bit of improvement, but that this might be your norm. And accepting some of that was hard.
Yeah, for sure. And I've had that on both ends, because I've been a social worker and counselor since, 1993. So 30 years, but like I have some very specific memories that they just don't go away. And I'm not sure I want them to. I just wish they had a little bit less impact. Like one of them is, I remember when I was 7, 8, and 9, when I would go to my dad to stores and restaurants, and he would hit on and pick up girls in their late teens and early 20s. And he was married to my mom. Like, they were still married. And like it didn't make sense to me, but it made sense to me. And I didn't have a context to put it in. So I didn't know that's what's happening, but I knew that was happening. And then when I was 9, I was home from school sick one day, and I'm lying in my room and I hear my parents arguing downstairs. And it was fierce. I'd never heard my mother talk like that with that energy and that volume of hate. And it turned out she had just found out the day before that he had been cheating on her their entire 27 years they were together with multiple women. I'm not talking like 2 at a time, sometimes 5 and 7 at a time. And everybody in her life knew. Like when she figured it out and she called up her sister, and her sister, yeah, well, you were happy. We didn't want to ruin it for you. She called up her mother. Oh, well, sometimes, Phyllis, you just have to put up with men or like that. Everybody in our neighborhood knew, but my mother, she lost it, as she should. And I still, about once every 3 or 4 months, wake up in the middle of the night remembering that argument.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at that damage for you, you've got to sort it out, and you don't sort it out in 2 days. You know, it's like when people, like when your friends come in, like, I'm getting a divorce, and you're like, it's going to take you about 3 years to get over that shit, man. You know, and they're like, fine, you know, whatever. But they're not, right? It takes a long time. And so when you're programmed and you're taught and you watch and you're genetically, you know, like your dad in a lot of ways, how do you deal with that?
Well, there's this book coming out tomorrow. Yeah, right. There's this book coming out tomorrow. I mean, in essence, that's what the whole book is about, what you just said.
Right.
Literally, that is what it's about, is what happened to create me. Because it wasn't just my dad, it was my older brother as well. And I am going to answer your question, but what it was like to be a really smart, really sweet, caring, open, friendly, warm, playful kid. And in a couple of years, like I went from that kid who was fun, playful, and brilliant to the other that kid, the one that all the teachers and the local police all talked about. Oh gosh, here comes Miichael Swerdloff again. Well, at least he's not as bad as his brother. The number of times I heard a judge say that to me, literally in a courtroom. At least you're not David. I swear.
Wow.
That is what he said after the charges were brought against me. At least you're not David.
Yeah.
So for me, what happened, Pete, is I fought it. I wanted to be who I was. I didn't want to be them. I didn't want to treat myself. I didn't want to be violent to all of my friends. I didn't want to hurt girls. I thought girls were really fun, and their bodies changed, and I got all excited about that, and that was fun. And I didn't want to be them. That was like the thing I had in my head, is just don't be them. You can be a jerk, just don't be them. And I became them, and it was so bad for me because I didn't come out of my mother being that person. My brother did come out that way. My father came out that way. They were like that from birth. I didn't come out that way. I wasn't prepared for me to hate people, to hate myself. I wasn't prepared for that. And I have this really clear memory of, I was DJing a club the night that John Lennon got shot and killed. And John Lennon and my mother's sister, my aunt, they were my two hopes in the world. You know, they were my hope that I could love, there could be peace, that there was hope for something. And I remember when John Lennon got shot and one of the bouncers came over to tell me about it while I was DJing. And I literally dropped the record in my hand and fell to the floor of the DJ booth. And I remember thinking to myself, if somebody's going to kill him, what the fuck are they going to do with me?
Yeah.
Because he was fighting for peace and I was what he was fighting against. I mean, And the worst part was, Pete, I got worse. And then I got worse. And then I got worse. And I remember I had robbed a very good friend of mine of what was about 20,000 in cocaine, which today would probably be worth a couple 100,000.
Yeah.
And I knew there was a good shot he was going to get killed because I knew it wasn't his money that bought the cocaine. And I remember waking up the next day, my nose was dripping and bleeding from cocaine and just life. And I remember thinking, I'm now them. I'm one of them. I'm one of them. The thing I said I would never be, I'm one of them.
Yeah. But you didn't stop being one of them, did you? You kept,
no,
kept going.
I didn't. You know, that's the insane part of it. It's like I so want that to be for dramatic reasons and for logic and everything to make sense. Yeah. I so want to say, and then I hit my bottom and I changed. And I didn't. I just found a different way to be the same thing, a different flavor. So I stopped being a mob guy. And you're going to get a laugh out of this. And then I became a Radio Shack store manager and earned a lot of money doing that. And meanwhile, I was still the same guy, just I was wearing a different hat, if you will.
Yeah. How does that work then? I mean, Radio Shack's a fun place to work. There's all kinds of people coming with questions. And if you like that sort of thing, what a dream job back in the old days. So how does that guy translate to that gig?
Be a really good liar. I'm saying it casually, but I was taught really well how to lie, both by watching masters and them literally sitting down and teaching me how to lie. Like, I'm not talking about when I was 22. They were teaching, I mean, Dad was teaching me how to sell a lie when I was like 9.
Right.
Yeah. I was really good at this. I mean, when we talk about recovery and growth, the hardest thing for me has been to stop learning how to not lie to myself and everybody else. Like the stop being violent part, that wasn't as hard for me. I mean, I had to learn what we call microaggressions, you know, the ways that I was violent without being violent. You know what I mean? Without touching anybody, without breaking, by the energy and the impact and the editorial and the words and the digs. Like that took a little bit more, but the actual violence, that didn't take long for me. Once I got sober, had a little bit of therapy, was going to AA and had a sponsor, and the being violent part didn't take as long. To stop lying to myself and more importantly, lying to everybody else. That has been an ongoing project and it still is today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You know, one of the things I've realized my childhood was fine. I mean, you know, my dad was abusive, but, you know, get in the list of people without that, right? My mom, she was doing her best. So let's not beat up my folks too much, but lying was a thing in our house. And the expression of love, I didn't understand it when I saw love with my friends. Like when I'd see their mom and dad come home and embrace, and I'm like, oh shit, this is bad. They're going to start screaming at each other, right? You know, and I was waiting for the anger and the abuse to come up, but it didn't. And I'm like, someone's putting somebody on here, because I didn't know that love actually existed in families in a way that was caring and kind, right? I always saw a different version of whatever that was supposed to be. I don't think it was love. But growing up, I'm like, what do you mean you believe me when I say that my leg hurts? You don't think I'm lying? And so learning that there was a whole different level of trust, I had to adjust my lens, like at the optometrist, like people will believe you when you say things. So, you know, and I'm already not like a person that lies a lot, but that was a completely new world for me.
I hear you. And I'm curious, what was, like for me, again, therapy, outpatient program, AA, there was a lot of people to give me the feedback that I'm full of shit when I was full of shit. What was your feedback loop? Who and what was it that for you, when you first realized, oh, I don't have to lie?
Yeah.
Who gave you that mirror?
I think a lot of it was self-learned. But I will say this though, like when I'm doing my spy stuff and I'm deployed, I, for the most part, don't lie at all. I tell the truth because I want to be the same reliable person wherever I'm at because I'm trying to build and trade trust. And if I do that, Pete believes he'll survive and be successful. So I mean, that's how much I'm a person who doesn't lie. Do I shape the truth? Sure. And have I lied in my life? Oh, for sure. Lots of times. But that lens came through experiences and just some gentle words from people that I have deep trust for, where they're like, you deserve to be loved, and I'm like, I never really thought about that, about like being deserving of love from someone, and it started to reshape. Like those words started to reshape how I thought about me, myself, other people, how I treat them, and it's a lot of that. So just the exposure to what love could be and the power of it started to change how I was. Was there a mirror that someone held up? I don't know about that, but the just in general, I met some very kind and trusting people, and I learned that I'm believable. Because if I would here's the thing: is like when you tell the truth to someone and they think you're lying, and there's no fixing that, it really fucks you up.
Mm-hmm. For real.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, especially if that person has addiction problems or other things. And so then you become
Sure.
manipulated, and it would never occur to me that someone would do that. Right. Look, in my field, there's a lot of sociopath, psychopath types, because we've got to go out and do very hard things in very hard places and compartmentalize things. And when I'm talking to someone, I need cultural intelligence and some empathy. But if you're too empathetic, you'll suck on a shotgun. Like that's just how it's going to be, because it's just the humanity is too poisoned around you. And so if you feel too much, you just won't make it. You won't be reliably good at the job. I don't know how anyone can be reliably good at the job, is what I should say.
It was this, again, obviously much different context, but I mean, I can't imagine being a full-time criminal and having empathy for other humans.
Yeah.
It's just not a good fit. It sounds like I'm being dismissive of it, but you can't feel bad about robbing people. You can't feel bad about ruining their life. You can't feel bad about harming their body in all the ways that we can harm people's bodies. You can't feel bad about it. The problem was I did.
Mm.
The rest of the people around me were numb. I don't do numb very well. I've never been a guy that's done numb well. I mean, I've acted numb, but I've never actually been numb. I mean, some of the heavy, intense drugs will do that, but my default setting is, in case you haven't figured out, I'm really passionate and I feel a lot. And it's a gift and a curse and all the points in between, Yeah. So for me, when you were sharing, what was coming up for me about you learning this on your own was me kind of self-teaching myself that I'm allowed to feel again.
Yeah.
That it's okay for me to be scared. It's okay for me to be hurt. It's okay for me to feel rejection. It's okay for me to feel abandoned. It's okay for me to feel emotional pain and loss and grief. Like, that just seems so stupid to me. It just seemed dumb. Like, why on earth would you want to be hurt or scared? Like, logically, it didn't make any sense to me.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things when you deploy somewhere, you're part of this machine, and it's a family. And my job in particular, is to be in harm's way to make sure that at least less harm comes towards us, and try to, I always say the four things I'm trying to do is help the commander win more and lose less, help the enemy lose more and win less, right? So I'm always out trying to do these things. And if I'm not doing it, then no one else can do it as good as me, because it's my network. It's my space. And so it's my job. And when you're not there, you're desperate to get back to the very thing that is tearing you apart, right? Because the pace of work, the kind of work, the danger, all these things are all mixed in there. And when you allow yourself to feel things like tired, like mad at somebody, I tend to have very, even still to this day, it's just like I think I'm physically different now. I just have a lot more anger as a natural response. Pretty good at look, I'm 55, so I'm not young anymore, but I'm pretty good at calming down and saying, doesn't matter. And just take it on the chin if I have to, even if I don't like it. It's like, you know what? That's fine. No big deal.
Right.
That doesn't hurt that
Yeah,
bad.
right.
But that took a lot of, well, and every day I have suicidal ideation. I always want to be dead. And so I deal with that, right? I'm in not in need of danger, everybody watching, but it's I get why people do it, right? I get where the next gate, and all of a sudden you run out of gates and you're completely in the danger zone, maybe unrecoverable. So I get all of that, but for now I have learned to process that stuff better. But I've seen and experienced a lot of violence. I'm not a terribly violent person at my base, but I definitely have punched people in the mouth, or in the face, or wherever I could punch them, a lot. And so even when you're not violent, my body's responding in a way that allows me to be violent. And you're stuck processing that too. Like, I don't know why I punched that guy, but I sure as hell wanted to, and I sure as hell did.
Mm. Yeah, I have such an aversion to male violence that my system doesn't even register that. I'm sure that's inside of me when you're talking about. Like, I don't have any doubt. Like, if right now on the street that I'm looking at, if somebody was walking down the street and somebody started doing something awful to them, I have no doubt in my mind I'd run down the stairs, jump without my shoes on, tackle somebody, and do anything I can to let the other person get to safety. Like, I have no doubt that exists inside of me. And I am so scared of my violence and male violence that my system doesn't even register that anymore.
Yeah.
I have shut that shit down so deeply, I don't even know it's there. Like, intellectually, I know it's there because I do this for a living. So it's impossible that I could be who I was and the way I was brought up and genetics, and I'm a guy. Like, it's impossible to me that it's not there, but it's not there. And I really feel like if you put me on a what do you call it, a detector, a lie detector, 40 times, and all 40 times it would come up that it's not there. Like, but I don't have any access to it.
Let's play in this space then a little bit. So there was a time where I would be a lot more like, I'm not looking for a fight, but I'm also not afraid of a fight. And so I'm thinking about a time when I was on the local public transit, and there were two young ladies there. It's crowded enough. There's some people are standing, some people are sitting. I happen to be sitting. And so these two young ladies get on, and the way I'm sitting, I can kind of see that there's a guy, and he's just laser beam locked on these two young girls. And so that ding, like that sends my sheepdog off, and I'm like, what's going on over there? And look, I'm not trying to get anybody's business, but this guy now has my full attention. And I'm ready to respond. So he starts talking to him, and they try to ignore him. Very common way to avoid that, on public transit is just to look, I'm going to go in my bubble, you go in yours, whatever. And he keeps talking, he keeps pursuing. And so I stand up. I told those, why don't you two girls sit here? And I look at that guy and I'm like, say another word. And if he'd said another word, one of us would have got their jaw broke. I mean, that sounds like heroic, but it's also like, dude, calm down. You'd accomplished it by just standing there and saying, I see what you're doing, knock it off, and then, deal with it in some other way. But I didn't have that air brake to go, this is good. This is already working, calm down, get those girls, protect them and everything else. But I'm like, all I need, and this is part of the combat guy in me, is I'm going to make the decision to end this conflict fast, and it's going to be painful for you, but you started it, it's so I had to like calm that part of me down, because that's how when you're doing my job and you're talking to someone, I've got to have like these physical barriers, so I've got to be close enough to communicate with someone and be human with them, right? But if they put a hand on me, that changes the rules. If someone who's a threat approaches and breaks my bubble at about 10 feet, you're going to have a different version of me. And I've already decided that once you crack that line, most likely something bad's going to happen to you, because that's how you have to survive. But I also have to work in a space tighter than that, much more intimate, because I'm in these rooms with 30, 40 people sometimes, and we're all talking. So it's a natural thing. Then I attuned it with training and experience. And that guy was firmly inside the danger zone where I'm like, if you at all are willing, it's going to happen. And, I'm not going to be, while you're talking, my fist is going to be flying towards this piece of your jaw right here that I know is going to snap when I hit it. And so that violence that's nothing I wanted or craved, but I was willing.
Well, I know they feel the same to you because you're in the same body and the same life experience. But to me, your subway and your professional thing, they feel like two different things to me. One of them is protecting somebody else.
Yeah.
And another thing is the other one is protecting yourself. And they both have value in completely different ways. And while you were sharing your experience on the subway, like literally in my head, it's like, yeah, I would do that. Yep, I would think that. Yep. So like, ironically, I would do the same thing. While I'm sitting here saying that I don't have that in me, like there's not any part of me that wouldn't do that. And I've done that.
Yeah.
I do that. I do that thing. So apparently it's there, and I don't even register that it's there on a level, and I do it. You know what I mean? Like it's literally like I pretend like I don't have that access to that, but I do. And there's people in my life that could, I'm not meaning that I need anybody to say that, but there's people in my life that could testify. Oh yeah, I've seen Miichael do that. It's kind of funny. It's like this guy goes from somebody you're lying on the couch with, and then he's ready to jump through windows. It's like, sure, okay, so I'm full of shit right there. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. How much of that is from your upbringing, and how much of that is just how you are, the combination of your folks, your genetics, and all that? Like, how do you sort that out?
Are you talking about the violence or the need to protect people, or both? Which?
Let's do both.
The violence, oh gosh, my older brother, amongst other things, he became a strong arm in the mob. That's what he grew up to be. And I was half his size as a kid. And I didn't understand how different living with David was. Like you're talking about your friends and parents loved each other, till I started spending time in other homes, and older brothers would come over and play with us and teach us how to do things. And if I was getting a little too something, they'd go in to make sure that the older brothers were protecting them and caring for them and tending to them and making sure that they had snacks after school and stuff like that. And I was like, snacks? Fuck, I used to hide shit all over the home so I could get to some of it without David attacking me with a baseball bat. I'm talking like age 5 and 7 and 9. And he literally stuffed me out a second floor window because I wouldn't give him a cookie. So I have it deeply embedded in me, both a fear of men and a hate of men. And I've worked on it and I've gotten better. But it doesn't take a lot for that part of me to be ready for battle when men get in my face. Maybe not physically, but energetically. It doesn't take a lot. And like I said, I shut it down. When it's about my safety, I shut it down. Not meaning that I'm going to let myself get beat up or attacked or something like that. I'm not stupid. I mean, I have a lot of skills. They're not like your skill set, but I certainly have a lot of violent skills, if you will. My toolbox isn't empty,
Right. Right.
I don't know that I feel good when that part of me comes out when protecting others, but I don't feel shame for that. When I get big just randomly in that way, I feel shame for that. Like, meaning if I'm trying to protect something that doesn't actually, there's no actual real life threat. Like, we understand, like, this is the analogy I always use. There's no difference in your body with jealousy if somebody is lying and cheating on you, or you think they're lying and cheating on you. Your body responds the identical way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're cheating, lying, or they're crying in their room because they can't prove to you that they're really doing the right thing. It doesn't matter. And perceived threat of violence is similar to that. There's not really a difference between perceived threat and somebody who's really got a gun. Do you know what I mean? Or really got a bat, or they're really ready to attack you with a knife. And I'm not really afraid of my safety. That doesn't mean there's not people that can't beat me up, because there's tons of people who can beat me up.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't carry a gun. I've never actually shot a gun, although I used to carry them sometimes. Somebody's got a gun, I'm losing. I don't have any ego that thinks, there's no they got a gun, they win. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no fight.
Very easy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's there's no mano y mano. It's gun y mano.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I don't have illusions about that.
Yeah.
One of the really weird things that's happened in my life is, I'm going to try to make a really big story a little bit shorter.
Okay.
I had an incredibly rare condition that got disguised as something else. I had been a passenger in a really violent car crash, and my body started having a lot of pain. And I got treated all across the spectrum of health, from complete naturopaths to allopaths and everybody in between. And they gave me every different diagnosis one could think of what was wrong with me. And in my body, I knew they were all wrong, but I had no idea what was right. It turns out that I had a very rare condition. There's, I think, less than 300 documented cases in the world. It's called tumor-induced osteomalacia. And basically, my bones changed shape, and I used to be 5'10" athlete, and now I'm like 5'3" with a really weird body. It's not as weird as it was 10 years ago, because I'm an athlete again and I play sports, but it's still, if I'm walking down the street, you're not going to be like 6 years of people would look at me. And like, I'm not exaggerating, women would pull their children behind them because I look like something out of like a weird movie. Yeah, I don't look like that anymore, but when I walk by people, they know that there's something different with my body. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I'm 5'3". There's only so much physical havoc I am going to be able to do with a guy who's 5'10", 220 and muscular. I recognize that. So there's a part of me that my nonviolent behavior is actually self-defense, because if I become big and get in somebody's face, I'm not going to win that battle like I used to be able to. And I have enough honesty and humility to know that. Yeah.
There's that, and just the willingness, like, oh, well, next time I get into a fight, I'm not going to get any more fights, I don't think. Won't be the first. Hopefully it'll be the last. But a willingness to get punched in the face, like, yeah, that's fine. That's good. We're going to see what I do to you too. And that comfort with your own demise, with your own, whatever, just with violence is a thing. Right now my hand is tensing when I'm talking. That comfort with violence is a dangerous thing for you, for the person you're talking to. And look, I'm not going to attack anybody, right? But if I did, wouldn't be the first time, and so it's a weird time bomb. Is it it's a familiarity with something that you shouldn't be familiar with? A buddy of mine, his name's Josh Montz. He was shot and killed in Iraq. They brought him back after 15 minutes, So his comfort with dying and death, it's outsized for anybody else, because he was gone. And so he, as part of his PhD studies, he gets through meditation as close as he can in yoga to that veil. And he's like, that's where my job is to study that, right? And so I'm bringing this over to Josh because his comfort with a thing that we're all terrified of, or avoiding, or doing all kinds of things to not even think about it. He wants to study it. He wants to be in that space to help guide us. And he'll say this to you: dying is a peak experience. Wow. I hadn't thought about that. So when you tie all these things together, violence and death and being associated, whatever it's going to be, there is a pathway out of this. And while we're talking, let me make sure I plug the book here. Look down below, everybody. Here's the link to Miichael's book, which drops tomorrow. There's the book in his hand right there. Ta-ding! Look at me getting my finger pointing right.
Yes.
And you guys should definitely get this, because there's a person who's experienced, they've been on this path. And whether it's dealing with the mob or getting all around to being able to heal with hands, it's a pretty incredible person. So you know what I always say, buy two. Buddy, read this thing. So buy one for you, buy one for a friend, and go through the process, and maybe you'll learn a little bit. And if you're trying to find out more, you can just go to Miichael's website. Let me put the link up for that too. Ding, right down there. That's that guy's website. So talking about Josh, talking about the comfort with death and dying, I think it's a peak experience. Talking about the familiarity with violence and knowing that, hey, this is a means to an end, and I don't anticipate. You heard me checking, like, I don't think I'm going to get another fight, right? But if I had to, I guess I would. Hopefully, I would not be the person that initiated it. Hopefully, I'd be the person that ended it. But hopefully, I just don't ever have one. And I'm glad, because my ego is touched down, because I like you, like I'm older. I'm like, I'm just going to leave and just walk the other direction, because it turns out if you just walk away from something, it's really hard to keep engaging with that person. And then if they chase you, well, then, all right, well, then now you're going to get it. But yeah, what are your thoughts? That's a lot. I threw a lot at you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I just gave my Gettysburg Address, so this was your time to give a Gettysburg Address. So yeah. we've now filled the quota.
Yeah.
What I think about when you were sharing was, for me, I was deeply immersed in AA culture for my first 12 years clean and sober. It was a very integral part of my life, and I haven't been to a meeting in a couple of decades, and it just didn't work for me anymore. And that's a different story. But I remember I was around a year and a half into recovery, and for reasons I don't know anything about, I can make conjecture and create spiritual connections that I assume are true, but I don't really know the truth. For some reason, I knew meditation was the answer for me. Yes, I was in therapy. Yes, I was in outpatient program. Yes, I was in AA, and I had all of my friends were in AA, and we talked recovery like 18 freaking hours a day. I knew meditation was my answer. And because of what time it was in history, even growing up outside of New York City, I could not find a book anywhere on meditation. Think of how different our world is in the 35 years that I've been clean and sober. Is I couldn't find a book on meditation. There weren't I couldn't find them in Greenwich Village, couldn't find them in Barnes and Noble, couldn't find them in Borders, couldn't find them in Dalton booksellers. I found a couple at this little weird ass place in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And I just did what I thought the book was telling me to do. There was no video, there was no teacher. So I had no idea if what I was doing was exactly what they said I should be doing or something completely different. But I knew it was the answer. I just knew it, Pete. Like there was nothing I had to think about. And I sucked at it. And I think that's the most important message that I like to share with people about meditation. You're going to suck at it for a really long time because it goes against what our culture tells our brain and our body to be doing. So there was meditation. Everything started to slowly shift for me. And then Reiki came in my life and everything shifted then. Because for the first time in my life, when you were talking about your friend's parents and when you were even talking about people loving you, I put in there that they probably touched you very kindly and lovingly and warm and all of that. And that was part of you trying to understand what being loved means, what that feels like. What changed for me was my interactions physically with people now included something besides my fear and my anger. It included this beautiful energy. And I didn't know what it was, like I was practicing it. And it feels so weird saying this, but since I started meditation, I've meditated every day since then. Since the day I was trained in Reiki, I've practiced Reiki on myself every day since then. Like, that seems impossible. Like, that seems impossible for somebody who grew up in a monastery. Like, it seems impossible for the Dalai Lama. Like, the fact that it's me, it blows my mind. And the reason I'm bringing that up is it was a super slow process. It was super slow and it was very gradual, but I knew Reiki was going to create something different in me than I could do on my own. I knew that. And it informed how I was as a social worker. It informed how I was as a counselor. It informed how I was as a friend, as a family member, as a lover, as a partner. It informed everything. It changed my diet without changing my diet. It changed the way I hug people without deciding to change how I hug people. Like, all these things happened in spite of me.
Yeah. It's great. I mean, you find those kind of tools. I'm one of the people that people call when their veteran friend kills themselves. And so you collect these lives and these stories. And one of the things that strikes me.
Can you just stop for a second, Pete? And I could just breathe that in. I don't want to say anything. I just want to take in. I'm one of the people that folks call when a veteran kills himself. Holy shit.
Yeah, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. You've got to find, and because of that, I've become pretty good at people dying. I understand there's a pace, and I've picked up some words of wisdom that I pass along. And sometimes those words of wisdom, it's not time for them yet. So I'm still kind of learning how to be a better person, because when you call, you're calling for a reason. And I don't know if that's just something about my aura or something people talking, who knows why, but I've become one of those people. And you learn a lot of things from these things. And one of the things I have learned is, especially with dudes, is one, we don't go to the hospital when we're hurt because we want to be tough. It's general, not just veterans. And two, if our brand of therapy that's provided to us doesn't work, we tend to give up, and we don't treat it like we would the gym, watching football or whatever. Like, no, I've got to get good at this. I've got to find a way that works for me. So maybe option A, B, C, D, E, and F aren't the answer. But if you had to go to option G, couldn't you withstand that path? We suck at that because we're dudes and we're like, I just want to go out and I'm just going to drink whiskey and that'd be how I deal with it. Like, what if you tried Reiki, or what if you looked for ways to get better until you found one that stuck? And even if none of them stick, the process of experimenting is the process for a lot of people.
What came up for me when you were sharing, Pete, and wow, that's incredible. And I guess I just want to say, because I have my version of that, it's a different group of people, but isn't it such an honor that we went through all that we've gone through and all the challenges and all, and we get to stand with people in a certain way. And because of those experiences, what an honor. But what comes up for me is, I think most of us men, we judge ourselves based on how good we are at something, not how valuable it is to us, or how it makes us feel, or how it makes other people feel. We judge ourselves in our skill set. How am I doing on a 1 to 10 scale? And if it's below 6, quit.
I don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. There's something wrong with it. Basketball's stupid because I'm not good at it.
Right. Yeah. You're right. And it makes you uncomfortable to be uncomfortable. And so there you go. Right. We're going to run out of time, and I don't want to do that because I really want to ask you this, because one of the challenges, and when I first read your packet, one of the things that jumped out at me is the word toxic masculinity, and words like narcissist and sociopath. And we tend to put a lot of things on people. This person is a narcissist. Like, I'm not qualified to make that call. I'll talk to people and be like, and we all have something, and I'll have some level of something. But if you act like schizo around me, I'm like, this person is probably schizo. I'm going to still do my best to treat you like a human and everything else. But it's easy to dismiss people, put them in a box, and be like, you are a Islamophobe. And you don't get to say that to me. Like, you don't get to decide what I am, what I'm afraid of. If I have this irrational fear, or maybe because of my experience, and look, I'm not an Islamophobe, but maybe because of my experience, I've seen the worst of people who are Islamic. And so there is a thing, and thanks for pointing that out to me. Not that you've done this, but we tend to do these things, and we'll say toxic masculinity, and we'll point the finger at it, right? How do we, if we want to be better dudes, if we want to be better dudettes, and we want to deal with people better, when we hear these words that are loaded with emotions, how do we deal with that to actually get through that? Because when I hear the word toxic masculinity, I'm just gonna be honest, I reject that. I'm like, no, that's nonsense, because it's something that is assigned to people without even knowing the person in any way at all. We tend to do that a lot in this society right now. So how do you take something that, even if you're not guilty of it, we have these things that we can improve. So what do we do with these words that have so much loading that are assigned to us without even knowing us? I mean, you were given a faulty diagnosis, right? Like, hey, that's what I have, right? And so how do we deal with these things and still get the benefit of working through your book and talking to you professionally, or whatever those things are?
For me, gosh, there's so much in what you just shared,
Pete.
We could have just spent like an entire hour or longer on that alone.
Yeah, we can do that too.
What comes up for me is most of this is shorthand for laziness. And if you read my book from front to cover, you probably won't hear those words used a total of 7 times.
Right.
They are more on the back cover than they are in the whole book. And I'm just going to take the easy way out here and say I was influenced by what's written on the back cover. Yeah. I'm just going to leave it like that. What I would say, to just use toxic masculinity, is this simple to me. And as soon as we get off, I'm going to say to myself, no, that's not really how you wanted to say it, Michael. This is one of them that, like, don't use the first one, use the second one.
But it's not an easy question either. I've hit you with something pretty heavy. Yeah.
It's not. So for me, when I think of toxic masculinity, is other people have to pay for my doubts about my masculinity. That's what I think of toxic masculinity, meaning if I'm interested in a woman and I start talking to her and I put whatever on her for saying no or saying she's not interested in me because of my doubts about my masculinity, my doubts about my attractiveness, my doubts about blah, 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 the whole freaking list of whatever my doubts may or may not be, she's paying the consequence of me struggling with my identity and relationship with masculinity. My dog is, I don't have a dog, but my dog is paying for my ability to never do the work to deal with my anger when somebody doesn't do what I want it to. To me, that's what I think of toxic masculinity, is all of you 8 billion have to pay a cost because I have questions about me as a man. Because since I don't have those questions anymore, I don't mean that I'm completely 100% free of them, but different conversation for another day. I did a solo backpacking trip in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. And at the other end of that, I remember sitting on this big ass rock and thinking to myself, what am I worried about my masculinity for? The number of people that would do what I just did is so freaking minuscule. There's nothing to think about anymore. And my point being was, and then that's even grown since then with kindness and love and empathy and compassion for them. I've become more of a man, ironically. I don't have those questions about myself. So I don't get defensive when people start a fight with me. If somebody says something, if I'm attracted to somebody and they don't give me the response I don't want, they don't pay the price for it. If somebody says yes to me and then we start dating and they say, I don't really like you, you're not my type, they don't pay the consequence for my wounds. That's to me, that's the difference of, if you will, like there's the line between us on the screen here, which are little clouds in the background. There's Pete on one side and Michael on the other. To me, that's the toxic masculinity side. If you pay a price for my questions about my masculinity, that's toxic masculinity. If you don't pay a price, it's not. And nobody's 100% one or the other. It's just
Sure.
more often than not. That's what we're talking about. That's my definition. Then again, if you ask me again in 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a completely different answer.
That's the best kind of answer, because it moves and we figure it out. And
It's
all those
fluid.
things. What it's not is, if I hold the door open for you, it's not toxic masculinity. I'm just being a nice person. I would have held it open for Michael, Dave, Tina, Katrina, whatever. I'm just being a good human, right? And so when someone brings that to you, the same thing, when you're paying a cost for their doubts about themselves or who they are,
Yeah.
you know what? I have enough grace. This is a big thing I've learned is I'm just going to build a bank of grace. And even if I feel like I'm overdrawn, I'm just going to break the rules. I'm going to push grace out, because not a person grace, everybody, the gift of grace. And just be like, you know what? Everybody has a bad day. Everybody, like I always say, everybody's bad at people dying. You know, they're going to not act like they normally would, and they're crazy because it's just too much, and you want to do, and mostly there's nothing to do. The person's gone. You can't change that. You know, you have to just count the time until there is something to do. The death certificate, it only comes at the speed it comes. Nothing to do until that comes, you know, and everything happens after that anyhow. And so we tend to get so passionate about something to do. It's part of these wounds, right? You've been wounded, and so now you are inevitably going to make somebody else pay the price, because you've lost someone and it hurts like hell. And your emotions are spinning and then they go backwards and then they go forward, you know. And so it's confusing. And I think that sort of this toxic masculinity thing might be a slower burn version of that. But yeah, we don't have to change who we are. You know, we can improve the person that we are, but we don't need to make somebody else pay for our failings. To be the better version of ourselves. How did I do? Did I do a pretty good job?
I think you did wonderful. And the other piece to this, to me, is everybody, regardless of gender, this doesn't dismiss or minimize quote unquote toxic masculinity, but everybody's toxic to a certain degree. Everybody is got some degree of narcissism. Everybody's got some degree of anger issues. We all do. But when most people pay a price for how we are, we're the problem. If only some people do, it's just light. I'm going to be a jerk sometime, Pete. I am absolutely convinced, probably before it gets dark, and I only got like 3 hours. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm probably going to do something. And that doesn't mean that I don't feel bad for hurting people, and I don't have shame, and I'm not embarrassed when I'm a jerk. I am going to be a jerk. I am absolutely certain. If I don't die in the next few minutes, I'm going to be a jerk. That doesn't mean I don't work hard to not be a jerk.
Yeah. That's
They
the
can
other
both
thing
be
too.
true.
Is most of our lives, we are doing our best. Our best is not linear. It goes up and down. It goes backwards. You know, and so in our moment, we're doing the best we can. And if you allow people to be, you know, not quite as good as they mean to be, gosh, I can take that in most cases. Yeah, listen, go watch me at the bank tomorrow, and I'll be like, lost all control. You and I, next week when the Dodgers and Yankees are playing, we'll be like, you son of a bitch, you know, kind of thing.
And that guy Pete and his mother and his ancestors, you know.
That's right. Exactly. Well, look, this has been awesome. Great. I don't want to take any more of your time, because there's a game about to start. We got to do that. But also, I love what you're doing, and I want to talk to you again. So let's have you back at some point. Actually, I'm going to introduce you to another friend of mine. I'll talk to you about that off mic in a second here. But thank you so much for doing it. Everybody should go and get the book. Yep, you got the right link. There's the link down there. It'll be out tomorrow on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or King Books or Walden Books, any bookstore if that exists. And so this is Michael. Michael, I'm going to give you the last words, and then I'm going to roll the credits when you're done.
Perfect. Well, one, thank you for having me on. And I so enjoyed our conversation. And I knew from watching episodes that you were going to be you. And that gave me space to be me. And if you want to read the book, I mean this genuinely. I'm not trying to talk anybody out of reading it. It is super intense, and it's uncomfortable, and it's not made for bedtime reading. And take care of yourself. And I'm not being sarcastic or condescending. If you choose to read the book, take care of yourself. You may need to put it down for a week at a time in between chapters. It's really tough to read. It's a tough subject. It's because of the way my life is. It's a story of all of the things that nobody likes talking about.
Yeah.
The beautiful ones and the ugly ones, and all the points in between.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to say one more thing because it's important. There are a lot of books like this. There's Atul Gawande writes a book called Being Mortal, and he's written some other books. And he's a doctor, and he's like, you're going to die. It looks like this. Your parents are going to die. It looks like this. Here is how all these things you have to account for, and how do you do this well, right? I can recommend this book 100 times. I can say, get your wills and trusts and everything in order. Understand what a pulse is. No, don't just stop it. You know, it's not as easy as you think. And look, I'm in my 50s. I know a lot of people that have lost a lot of people. And when you don't plan for these things and when you fear the book, then you don't get to be good at the thing that is really fucking hard. And so, again, ding, 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 ding. If you understand any part of this message and any part of it makes you go, yeah, that could be me. Or, oh, man, I'd like to learn more about that. That book right there is a resource. Okay, for real, this time you get the last word, and then I'm really going to shut up. Go ahead.
Perfect. Somewhere in the middle of our conversation, you shared the thing that my mentor, Betsy, shared with me many years ago, and it's my life practice. We have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Love it. Love it. Right.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you